absolutely fine. So if you are new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button and also click on the bell notification icon for our new updates. So today we are going to talk about what is microgrid, why microgrid is used, and what are the components of microgrid. So microgrid, as the name suggests, micro means small. Grid is basically a interconnection network of the sources and the distribution network and the load, which is basically the consumers. So similarly, microgrid suggests a small network. So why microgrid is used? It is used as a solution to supply power to villages or areas which have no availability of grid connection. I mean, like there are many areas where the grid has not yet reached, and their connection with the grid is not financially feasible. For an example, if the last end of the grid is at a point X, okay, and the village is at distance Y. Suppose the distance between these 2 points is almost 4.5 kilometer or 6 kilometer, okay. If the number of consumers are more and like looking after the consumption and everything, then only the utility grid will extend the grid network, the distribution line till those consumer. But in many of the cases, in terms of small villages, and when the distance is very huge that it cannot be covered as per like financial feasibility of the project, then in such cases microgrid is very useful. Okay, so it is not necessarily that if there is grid connection available, so it is not a microgrid. It can be, some cases may have grid connection, some cases may not have grid connection. Okay, and the other case where this microgrid is used is similarly village areas where the reliability of power supply is very low. I mean, there is load shedding or power cut for long duration of times for more than almost 7 to 8 hours. So at those places, to increase the reliability and availability of power, microgrid is used. So now we'll talk about the basic components of microgrid. Microgrid contains power plants, which are basically your different sources of energy. So these again depends upon your location of the site or the location of the village. So suppose there is a good river flowing by nearby. So you may have a small tidal power plant there, okay, or you can also call it as hydropower plant. Then you can have if you have large open area, then you can set up a solar power plant. Then suppose the wind speed in that area is very much better, so you can install the windmill. But in most of cases, in microgrid, you need to have a firm source of power, okay, a reliable power source. Suppose the grid connection is not available, then you need to have either battery system or you need to have the diesel generator as a backup, because you need to have a strong backup to meet the situation demand. Suppose there is some natural disaster or any kind of problem, then, or suppose during rainy season there was no enough sunlight, so no enough electrical energy is generated, no battery is charged properly, so these also need to be taken care of. So second is the distribution network. So that is basically needed. You all know what is distribution network. Then energy management system. This is a very important part in the microgrid, because it is basically it what basically does is it monitors the energy available with the microgrid. Example, if you have the batteries, if you have the solar, if you have various sources of energy, it will keep monitoring it always. It will always keep monitoring the load, the demand versus the generation, as well as it also makes the decision of like how the energy needs to be utilized. Okay, like the priority first to be given to the load, then to your batteries, or suppose during night time or evening time there is no other source available, so it will be responsible for using the power from the batteries, or maybe it can start the generator as a backup once the battery voltage goes down. So basically this is the brain, okay, which monitors everything for a reliable power supply. And next is emergency backup supply or the interconnection of the grid. So same, either you need to have a backup supply, power supply, or you need to have at least the interconnection of the grid. This basically increase the reliability of the microgrid. So now we'll talk about advantages and disadvantages of microgrid. So the very first advantage is that it has very less distribution losses, as the power plants are located nearby and the distribution area is also very small. Then next is you get a very good quality of power supply. There is no distortion, there is no voltage drop, nothing. The quality of power supply received is very good, and this microgrid can be used to connect with the utility grid, okay, and it can also operate alone, independent, without the grid. So basically this forms the concept of smart grid, okay. So your microgrid is connected to the main grid, okay, but it can also operate independently. Suppose there is a grid failure, then or there is a kind of fault in that particular grid network, then your grid can isolate itself from the main grid and operate on its own. During disaster time, it is very easy to restore the microgrid, as the as the generating capacity or the power plants are distributed, so that is why it is very easy to bring them up for generation. Next, we'll talk about the disadvantages. The project cost increases in absence of the grid connection. As I said earlier, that you need to have a very much reliable power supply to handle the emergency situations. Next is resynchronization with the main grid can be a problem. Yes, as you all know that when you need to synchronize or connect your microgrid with the main grid, or whenever you connect two sources of power and you want to operate them in parallel, then you need to match the voltage, the frequency and the phases. So that can be problem. Next is electrical energy needs to be stored in batteries, which require space and maintenance. Then next is to ensure consistency, interconnection standard needs to be developed. As suppose many microgrids are set up. So all these setting up of microgrids, when they are connected to the main grid, when this interconnection comes into picture, there should be proper standards and rules to be developed, so as suppose there is a fault from the grid side, then then the microgrids are very well protected and are safe. Otherwise what will happen, the fault current from the grid is very huge and that will damage the microgrid. So okay guys, that was it from my side. Before closing, I would also like to give you my experience with the microgrid. I have been designing microgrids for a while. So first of all, microgrids actually, see, whenever microgrids installed to improve the reliable power supply or the quality of power to the consumers for the villagers, actually the cost of microgrid is more, because you install the solar, you install the batteries, or you install the generator itself. So the cost of generation, like the running cost of the generator is also more. So the tariff offered is more, unless there is involvement of any other third party or government organizations to fund your project. So this is one of the factor which I think is which leads to expensive rate of tariff for the consumers. But however, this is very good application where there is no power available. As we all know now, electricity is one of the basic needs for human life. Okay guys, so I would also like to tell you the brief about designing a microgrid, but that will continue in our next video. So do let us know about your feedback on this particular video, and if you like this, then click on the like button. So see you in the next video. Thank you.